20s, they're approaching a job or an opportunity based upon how much they will learn or based upon how much they will earn.
I have seen that there are people that tend to care less about, the grind, I guess, or making as much money as they can.
What pays better, being a generalist or being a specialist?
I think it really depends, because I think you have people at the top of, who are generalists and who are specialists, probably at the top, at the middle, and at the bottom of your fields.
The fresh attorneys will have an issue finding a job.
I think AI will definitely, and in some cases has already started to be able to do the work that your sort of first year, second year lawyers have done historically.
Stephen, thank you for joining in.
Hi, Amit. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Stephen, what does it take from becoming a good lawyer to becoming a general counsel?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of different attributes of what makes a great general counsel. But I think if I had to pick, a couple of them, I think one would be really learning how to think like a business person. So I think you learn that lesson a little bit when you transition from a law firm to being an in-house counsel. I think everyone makes that transition. It took me a few months when I was at a law firm, and then I went into my first in-house role where I realized that interacting and advising your in-house clients is a little bit different than when you're a law firm. You're a lot closer to the issues. You think a lot more about the business impact versus just what the legal answer is. And oftentimes the legal answer and the business answer are two very different answers. And I think for a general counsel or someone who's leading a legal organization at a company, you take that one step further. You're thinking about the business issues, but you're also balancing the considerations of a lot of different stakeholders. So by that, I mean, you're thinking about what makes sense for the company, for the employees. You have the board that you need to think about. For a company like ours, we have investors, and you need to think about what impact that could have on investors. And so there's just a lot of other, I'll call them balancing considerations. And so answers are not as easy as, what does the law say about this particular issue, but it becomes more of a, here's the law, but here's 90% of the answer that is not about the law. And to me, that's probably the biggest, I guess, the biggest thing that you have to learn. It took me, again, a while to learn, and I'm still learning how to do it better every day. But yeah, that's what I would say is the most important thing that you have to learn.
That's very powerful, Stephen. That's the differentiator is very powerful. Who do you? So there are people built for in-house, and then people made for law firms. Which lawyer, what type of lawyer, what type of person should choose a law firm career, becoming a partner in a law firm, or what kind of person should choose becoming a general counsel in an in-house setting? How do you advise on that?
So I think there's probably more overlap than people might originally think. So by that, I mean, I think there are probably a lot of lawyers, I would include myself, who could succeed at a law firm, but who could also be very successful in an in-house career. I do think there are attributes that tend to go more toward one type of career or the other. Probably the biggest difference is when you think about people who are very successful at law firms, they are typically people who are very, very good at a particular specialization or area. So someone who is really great at appellate litigation or at jury trials or at mergers and acquisitions for a particular industry of a particular size of deal. Whereas when you're in-house, I think your skills are less about being, the top 1% or the top 0.1% of your technical field, and a little bit more generalist in nature. And that's actually one of the things that attracted me to being in-house was even when I was at the law firm, the reason that I wanted to be a lawyer was I was very interested in being a generalist. I really liked the idea of learning something new every day. And the reason I chose litigation was because when you're a litigator, you work on a number of different cases, and each case can be completely different. It can be in a different industry, it can be a different type of issue, and you have to learn how to learn those issues in a very short amount of time and learn them well enough to be able to explain them to a judge or to a jury or to a government agency. So, that I think at the time I didn't realize that that was a skill that would be very useful for being in-house. But as I look back on my career and how I intentionally started my law firm career, it's actually been something that I think has served me very well in my in-house career.
What pays better, being a journalist or being a specialist?
I think it really depends because I think you have people at the top of, who are generalists and who are specialists, probably at the top, at the middle, and at the bottom of your fields. I guess if I had to pick one of them, if I had to, if it was a forced choice, I would say um, probably people who are very specialized, who do something that a lot of other people can't do. There's probably even though it might be a smaller market, it probably pays pretty well to be, the one person that can do a particular type of law really well. That being said, one good piece of advice that I got from a mentor was that don't think about the money, don't follow the money, right? Do what you love, and the money will follow. And I've tried to live out my career the same way. I think if I architected my career based on what I thought would bring me the most money in the moment, I would probably have lived a very different career than the one I live today. But I feel very fulfilled in what I've been able to do so far, in the types of roles that I've had, in the types of work that I've done. I would say that I'm quite happy with how what I've learned, and so obviously you see articles that talk about how much money these law firm partners make or these large public company general counsels make, and it's interesting and it is headline grabbing. But I think for me personally, of course I love having more money. More money is better, but it's not something that drives me in my career. It's something that's nice, but if I think about, maybe the top 10 things that matter to me in my career, when I think about opportunities that may come to me, it's probably in the top 10, but it's not in the top 5.
Hmm. Okay. And what would be top five? What
Well, number
drives you?
one
What
for me,
what motivates you?
so by far the number one is the opportunity to learn. And for me, I think about my career as one that allows me to be a lifetime learner. When I started at law firm, the reason I picked the law firm that I did, and the reason I picked the practice area I did, was the opportunity to be able to learn a lot about a lot of different things. When I went in-house, the opportunity to learn something new, an entirely different skill set. Again, as we talked about, in-house counsel and law firm lawyers, there's some overlap, but there's a lot of different skills that you learn. And when I took my current role at Odeko, it was again an opportunity to learn more, where I've been able to, I think I've been here for almost 3.5 years now. And I've learned not only how to be a great lawyer and a great general counsel, but I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to learn about a lot of other subject matters. For example, I oversee our M&A team. And that's allowed me to not only learn M&A from the legal side, but from the business side as well. Done the same thing with our HR team. I've learned how to, not only look at the legal side of issues with employees, but to think about the human side and the people side. And it's been the same with some of the other, I will call them non-legal opportunities that I've been fortunate to have here at Odeko.
Do you think young lawyers are approaching their careers as learn first? I mean, most of them are like money first, and who is paying more. But do you think the Gen Zs, the people in their 20s, they're approaching a job or an opportunity based upon how much they will learn or based upon how much they will earn?
I think it's hard to speak for a whole group of people. I think you probably have some people that fall on one side of the spectrum, some people that fall on the other side. I will say that as a general rule, though, I think the Gen Z or the people that are just now beginning to enter the workforce, I do observe that I think they probably um, like money is probably not their number one reason for doing some of the things that they do. I think I don't know if it's a generational thing or it's just the people that I interact with, but I think there is, and again, I don't know if it's a trend, but I have seen that there are people that tend to care less about, the grind, I guess, or making as much money as they can. I think people, which I think is healthy, are learning to kind of balance their life and work in different ways. And again, that's a generalization, and there are always going to be people that don't fit into that generalization. So every generation, you're going to have people who, care mostly about work and maximizing their career or maximizing the amount of money they earn, and you're going to have people who don't care about that at all. And then most people will fall somewhere in the middle. So that's kind of how I view that world, I guess, today.
Beautiful. Stephen, you worked with law firm, then you moved to a company called WeWork, and WeWork was in news for right and wrong reasons. And you were part of that the company while the company was making news because of Adam or what was happening in the company. As a very responsible person, like a legal person in the company, what were you going through when there were disputes with the investors and the CEO? How is a lawyer supposed to conduct himself when the company is going through a turmoil or the company is in the news for right or wrong reasons?
So very, very interesting question for me because during that time, I would say for a couple of years, I was actually running the litigation and investigations team, which means that all of those disputes that you mentioned with investors, with the board, with all those other parties, with landlords, I was quite involved in managing not just individual matters, but our strategy in general. And so this goes back to actually something that I talked about earlier. I wasn't the GC of WeWork at the time, but I think that experience, and let's just say between 2019 and 2021, which is the 2 years between our withdrawn IPO and when we finally went public in October of 2021, it was a very intense time where we were essentially trying to turn around the company. And so, one of the most difficult things about that experience was that you had all of those different parties and that you had to think about, right? So, like every action was not just how does this action impact the company, but how might it have an impact on all of these other relationships? And it's not an easy question to answer. And we probably got that question or answer wrong some of the time. But I think it taught me, at least, and I think it taught a lot of the other people that I worked with, to really learn how to evaluate issues from a more strategic, a larger picture point of view. And one example I'll give about that is we had obviously a situation where we were not able to meet all of our lease obligations, and we had hundreds of leases all around the world. And so we had to make a decision on how we were going to um, resolve those issues. And the answer, I think, was different depending on a lot of different factors. And so what we had to do was develop a whole strategy on taking into consideration who was the landlord, where was the lease located, who were the members that were in the building who could potentially be impacted, what were the potential PR considerations if we decided to do or not do a certain action. And you just had to think about a whole list of issues for every single one of these decisions. And so you had one decision, but you also at the same time had hundreds of decisions. And so that was something, again, that I think for me really helped me to learn how to think about issues more broadly. Because if I'd just been operating as a lawyer, there's obviously a very clear answer in a lot of those cases of, what is the answer? What is your legal obligation? But that answer is the start of the answer. It's not the end. And so you can resolve the legal question very quickly, but then, most of the rest of the discussion is, but what do you actually do? What are the practical realities of the world that you're living in, the situation that you're in? And often the answer will be very different than the sort of cut and dry answer that you might get if you're just asking the technical legal question.
That's very powerful, Stephen. So, if the company is going through crisis and there are people like you who are trying to save the situation and turn the company around, you have two options. People have two options. Either you jump the ship or you stay put and you solve the problem no matter what. And while you're solving the problem no matter what, you can also get fired because the company doesn't need you anymore. The company is going through a turmoil. It will maybe ask people to leave. You decide to stay put, perhaps risking your career, maybe risking your job, and also and did not jump at that time and solve the problem. What made you stick around into a ship that wasn't floating well?
So probably a couple of things. The easy answer is the people. I, you can say a lot about the company and the situation that the company found itself in, but regardless of all of that, the people that worked there and still work there were amazing, incredible, talented people who it was just great to be around. And so a big part of my decision, for better or for worse, was that I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. I loved my colleagues on the legal team. I loved the people on the business team. And so that was actually a pretty big consideration in why I decided to stay. And the other reason, and honestly, I don't know if these are good reasons or not, but the other reason was there's something about being able to see something through to its conclusion. And what I mean by that was when the our attempts to IPO in 2019 didn't happen, I think there was a question, right? As do you stay or do you go? And that's a question that I had to ask myself every day for the next 2 years. And the answer that always kept me at the company was I want to see this succeed. I want to see the company turn around, and I want to be a part of the story and to be able to say that I was a part of the story. And it wasn't easy. There were some days where I wondered if I'd made the right decision. As you might imagine, during those 2 years, I got a lot of calls from recruiters. I had some pretty interesting opportunities that I ultimately passed on. But again, it came down to I want to be part of the turnaround story. I want to be able to show everyone that there was something more to the story. And I think we succeeded. I think taking a company that was on the brink of bankruptcy and 2 years later being able to go public, I think that is an incredible task. And I am not taking credit for that. I was a very small part of that process, but I think being able to be a part of that process, be a part of that story, I think there's value in that you can't even measure, right? I think the lessons that I learned during those 2 years, I still take with me. They still benefit me in my current role. Um, when things happen at our company that are not always positive, like there's nothing that happens that I can't say that I haven't dealt with in some way or another when I was at WeWork. And those experiences, I think, will continue to serve me for as long as I continue in my career.
That's very powerful. Stephen, you mentioned that you wanted to stay and see the end of the conclusion. You could see that there were beautiful people you surrounded yourself with, which who kept you going, and therefore you just stayed and you learned a lot while you were doing all this. What was your motivation? What was your why? Why you want to stick around? What were you trying to prove something to yourself or to somebody else? What was the motivation and
I
the
mean, part
why?
of it, yeah, I think part of it was
And I
wanting to
also
prove
would
everyone
mind
wrong,
clear everyone
right?
wrong.
Everyone when the IPO didn't happen, I think it was a moment of a lot of people saying, "I told you so." There was never any way that it was going to work. So there was definitely some part of that, but I think part of it was also, you know, again, not necessarily proving any trying to prove anyone or anything wrong, but just wanting to, I guess you could say, prove to myself that that I could be part of the engine that turned everything around. Um, I I I'm like even now, right? This is years after the fact. I'm still proud of what we accomplished, and it's not like there's a necessarily a monetary value to that, um, but uh, to be able to say that we did that, which again was a very, I think, incredible and remarkable feat. Um, that's just something that I wanted to be part of, and so probably wanting to prove something to myself, but just wanting to know that we could do it. Again, like I think there were a lot of people who made a different decision, who said, I would rather not be part of this process. And I think that's a totally fine answer. I had a lot of colleagues who decided to do something different and move on to other things, and that's totally fine. But I think for me, I really wanted to be a part of that, and and I years later, you wonder if sometimes you wonder, was that the right choice? But I think what it comes down to is, if I had left in the middle of everything, um, would I have wondered about the role I could have played? And I think I would have always wondered. And so for me, it was important to stay there and see it through to the end.
Beautiful, Stephen. This is very inspiring. When the when the family is going through a turmoil or the company is going through a turmoil, everybody starts fighting. Everything is happy, everybody is happy. So when the company is going through a turmoil, there's a sales team, there's a marketing team, there's a finance team, there's a legal team, and because they're going through a turmoil, everybody will start fighting, everybody will start blaming this person and that person. How how does the legal keeps everybody in senses when the company is going through a turmoil? How do you keep all the stakeholders in senses and
So
the investigation going on, there's IPO not happening, the payments not happening, nothing is going right.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think that's what you described as a very natural occurrence when things aren't going well. And one of the things that I think is special about a team like the legal team is that the teams are typically built to be process oriented as well as rational. So Particularly, I think of myself and my background. I come from a litigation background. When I was at the law firm, we handled very high pressure situations, a lot of issues that were essentially bet the company litigation or matters. And so um, for us, it was almost second nature to deal with those high pressure situations. And I think the other thing that you learn at a law firm is you can be the fall person, right? If there's something that there's advice and you give advice and you give the best advice you can give, but either it turns out not to be the best advice, or something may happen that regardless of what the advice was, it would have happened anyway, but it was a bad outcome. And so I think when you're at a law firm, you're in the service industry, you learn to roll with the punches. You learn sometimes to take the blame for those sort of situations, whether or not it was, your fault versus someone else's fault or anyone's fault. And so I think that's a good temperament that allows uh, the legal team or members of the legal team to play a role where you're trying to bring everyone together in tough times. You're able to keep a level head. I think good lawyers, particularly good in-house lawyers, are able to bring people to the table and change the conversation from finger pointing to finding the solution. And I saw a little bit of that when I was at WeWork. We were, again, very stressful situations, a lot of opportunity to try to step out of the spotlight and point at other people as to why things might be happening a certain way. But I think that's also an opportunity. So for lawyers who find themselves at a company where there is a crisis happening, I think if you're able to be the type of lawyer that's not afraid to um, take charge of a situation, to put up your hand, to volunteer answers, to try to solve the situation, if you can sort of put out of your mind that concern that if you raise your hand and things don't go right, people might blame you, your job might be impacted. I think if you can put that out of your head, you can actually do a lot and provide a lot of value. And for me, there was definitely a point during my time at WeWork where I decided, you know what, um, I just don't care, right? If they decide, if something happens, if I give advice and someone decides that it wasn't the best advice and they decide to fire me, that's okay. I would rather do the best that I could to help solve the problem and not worry about the personal consequences. And I think that decision actually helped me a lot. It helped uh, put me in positions where, because I wasn't afraid to volunteer for things, people gave me more and more responsibility. And that is a lesson that I've tried to carry over to my current role where, um, things are going to happen. Things won't always be perfect, but if you continue to bet on yourself and put yourself in situations where you have the opportunity to succeed or to fail, um, more often than not, you will uh, find that you're in a better place at the end of it, whether it's because you were able to solve a problem that gave you more visibility, or whether even if you failed, you may have learned more about yourself and grown through that failure. So that's something that I try to continue to practice whenever I can.
That's very empowering. That's a very beautiful wisdom, Stephen. Thank you for giving this to us. If you had to choose one very important chapter of your life, the most important chapter of your career or professional life, what would that be?
I think for me, I think the easy answer is my time at WeWork, for all of the reasons that we talked about. It was an immense time of growth for me, but I think if I think about it, I think that the time that I'm in my career right now is a really important time to me. So this is my first company that I've been the general counsel of. So it's my first opportunity to oversee everything that relates to legal, not just the areas that I'm directly responsible for. And so I think that has been a huge amount of growth for me from a legal perspective. But then, as I mentioned before, it's more than just the legal. I'm learning, uh, how to um, do and manage teams that do things that I never knew how to do before. Before I came to Odeko, before I started in this role, I'd never run an HR team. I'd never, handled press releases. I'd never done an M&A transaction. Um, I never, had to figure out the insurance broker to hire or how to help, our customers get insurance policies. All of these things are new to me. Um, and so it's part of what I talked about before about wanting to be a lifetime learner. And this period of my life, I feel like I am learning something every day. And so it's been a great time of my career today.
You are already very wise. But if you have to advise to your younger self, what advice would you give your younger self?
So
How
I
would
think
do
I
things
would,
differently?
yeah. So other than
Other
telling
than
myself
how
to
the
buy
house.
Bitcoin
Right.
when it was,
Engage.
10 cents, I think a couple of things. The first piece of advice I give
Great.
myself is to say yes more. And again,
Okay.
I think I've learned that
Yeah.
lesson, but it took me a while to learn that lesson. And the other piece of advice I would give myself is to bet on yourself. And I think that's a lesson that I'm still learning how to do. Um, I think it's easy especially as a lawyer, to think about the potential downside of every situation. What could go wrong if I decide to go to this startup company? It could fail. If I decide to take on this new function, I might have no idea how to do it and I might mess it up terribly. If I decide to do this could happen and it could be bad. But I think as lawyers, we need to learn to look at the bright side of things. We need to look at the possibilities. And for me, again, I think the lesson that I'm continually learning is uh, to bet on myself, to believe that I can do it, and to be okay knowing that I'm not going to do it perfectly the first time or the second time or maybe even the 100th time. But I will learn how to do it better and better, and um, I'm always going to get something out of it that will make me a better person.
Bet on yourself. Say yes to more things. Uh, and also, this is one philosophy. This is perfectly fine. One more philosophy says, say no to more things so that you can be more focused. Because let's say, one of my mentors said, "Hey, Amit, if you said yes to this girl, that means you've said no to all of the girls. if you said yes to this job, that means you've said to no to all other jobs. So be very careful of when you say yes, because when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to all other things. And Warren Buffett says no. So Warren Buffett says no to 99% things. No, 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 just to stay focused. No, no, no. How do you agree to this philosophy as well?
So I think those two concepts can coexist. So obviously, saying yes, it means doing more, um, splitting your focus in some way. But I think you can also say yes to more things while continuing to say no to a lot of other things. So in my role today, I do get reach outs from time to time from new opportunities, and sometimes you have to decide, I'm going to commit myself to this job, whatever it might be, and say yes to more and more in this job and say no to all the other external opportunities. And so for every person, I think, you know, what that balance is, what are you saying yes to and what are you saying no to, can look very different. There are people who are at the times in their careers where they're looking for the next external opportunity, and so for them it might mean saying no to taking on more in their current role because that will make it more difficult for them to have the time to pursue other opportunities. So it might be the exact opposite of what it is for me. But I think there's a lot of um, there's a lot of uh, brilliance in that in what you said about saying no. It's just the question of where do you apply that? Like, what are you saying no to versus what are you saying yes to?
One of the framework that I follow for decision making, for yes or no, is this: if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. For example, if my friend is telling me, "Hey, let's go for a coffee," if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. So if I'm thinking, should I go for a coffee or should I not go for a coffee? It's a no. The moment you start thinking,
I think, yeah,
should
I
no,
mean,
we
I
don't.
think that's definitely I think a good way of thinking about it in some cases. I think for me, I'm at the time in my life where um, it might not be a hell yes, it might be a why not, and if it's a why not, I'm still going to try to do it. But there is a line, right? Like as you said, and I think what you're implying, which I think is very true, is that everyone has a limit, and I think you have to understand your limit, and you have to understand the trade-offs. So if I say yes to more things, um, at some point I'm going to reach a limit where all the things I'm doing, I maybe am doing less well because I've said yes so many times. And so I think for each individual, it's really important to find where that balance is. When do you start saying no? When do you know yourself well enough to know I have taken on everything that I can take on without sacrificing my reputation of doing excellent work? And you know, I sometimes I've definitely hit that point before. I probably exceeded it at some points, and so but in some ways, uh, you have to take on more to understand where your limitations are, and you may find that you have more capacity than you realize that you did. Is be careful there, right? Because you don't want to burn out. You don't want to end up in a situation where you've overcommitted, but that's just I think part of that lifelong process of knowing yourself. So I think your mentor, your friend who gave you that advice, I think there's a lot of good truth in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And coming back to that, extending this question a bit, you said yes to co-chair the Bay Area Asian American Journal Council group. Uh, why would you say yes to starting a community like that? And what's your why on it? And what's your hell yes in it? I really want to do this.
So this was an interesting opportunity that sort of came to me, right? It was not something that I'd sought out. I was part of the group. I enjoyed being part of the group. It's a great um, group of, I think at this point we're up to 230, 240 Asian American general counsel in the Bay Area. Um, and when the opportunity came to me, I thought about it a lot. I did, what every nerdy lawyer does. I wrote down a list of pros and cons. What, how much time did I think this was going to take? What it would require from me, and what are the benefits that I would get out of it? And one of the biggest benefits that I saw from it, I think, was looking back on it, not surprising that I said yes, which was I really do care about our community, and I do really care about um, making or helping people to get better at things. And so, one example of this, I guess, is um, I work with a lot of organizations as a mentor to younger lawyers, and it's an opportunity to kind of pass along things that I've learned or mistakes that I've made to help people earlier in their careers. Take advantage of the things that I've learned to do well and to avoid some of the mistakes that I've made. And in a very similar way, I think helping to run BAAA GC is similar, where I really appreciate and love the community that we have of these general counsel in the Bay Area, and I want us to succeed. And one of the ways that I can help everyone succeed, in some small way, is to help this organization continue to grow and to help it to flourish. And um, you know, if you think about it from that perspective, the opportunity to change, or to make everyone's lives a little bit better, I think to me it was a no brainer. It was, of course, I would want to do this. Of course, I want to see our community succeed and grow. And one of the biggest ways I can do that is by being a part of the leadership team. And this goes back to a question that I always ask myself. In addition to to what can I learn from a new opportunity, is what is the impact that I can have. And I saw this as an opportunity to take on a role that would allow me to have uh, an outsized impact on this community. And so, again, that for me made it an easy question. Not a paid role. I don't get any money from it, but I do get to see my friends and my colleagues benefit from this community. And so for me, it's something that I value very highly.
That's very nice of you, very beautiful of you to think about your community so much and do so much for them and giving your personal time and effort and energy to grow this community. That is very empowering, very beautiful, Stephen. Stephen, let's jump to AI. How much of AI are you using right now in your current role, and how is that transforming the role of GCs?
Um, so I'm using AI. I'm probably not using it as much as some other people, but I'm using it more than some other people. So if I just take, for example, today, I probably used AI between 5 and 10 times to help answer a question or to help me brainstorm an issue or to double check me on something that I thought was true about a legal issue. So I do use it as a resource. I think there are people who I would call super users, right? People that really understand generative AI, that really understand LLMs, that probably are using it, every hour of every day. I'm not to that level, but I am to the level where um, it's natural for me to use it as part of my role. Um, and I would say that that hasn't always been the case. When it first became a thing, I think I probably wasn't one of the first people to jump on the bandwagon, but over time, I've definitely seen the overall perception of AI shift. And one thing that you try to do as a general counsel is to be at worst moving with the shift, and at best moving ahead of the shift. And so AI is something that I've been following for probably a couple of years now. I actually have spoken on a couple of panels about AI and how companies and legal teams are utilizing AI for their projects and other things that they work on. And so it's something that we talk about all the time internally in our company and with our teams, and it's something that we encourage each other to use and to get better at. So I would say I definitely use it probably every day.
Are you relying less on the outside counsel because you yourself have a lot of AI tools? So in the question is the are we giving more less work to our outside counsels? Is that the future?
I think that it's there. It's definitely. I definitely probably am using outside counsel less, although I don't know how much less. But I think there are definitely questions that I may have gone to outside counsel to before, where I think between my gut and the ability of AI to help confirm or supplement my initial understanding, I've been able to answer those questions sufficiently without going to outside counsel. I think there's always going to be a place for outside counsel. I think there are, areas of specialty or questions that, of advice and strategy that I don't know if Chat GPT is ever going to be able to truly replace. But I do think that there will be a fundamental change in the in-house and outside counsel relationship as AI continues to develop. I mean, I think you're seeing that already. Um, I think there are law firms out there who are doing what they can to implement AI into their own internal processes and are using that as a selling point to their clients, and how they can either provide additional value for the same amount of money, or even save their clients money in some cases. Um, and obviously, that's something that is a very attractive proposition to in-house counsel, who, we all have our budgets and have our limitations on um, what we can spend or use outside counsel for. So um, I I definitely think it's going to change how the outside counsel relationship works. I don't know exactly in what ways, but I'm seeing it happen already.
When the outside counsel are using AI, are they passing on the benefit and the cost benefit to the client?
Uh, so I think it depends. I think probably some firms are and some firms are not. I was talking to a law firm the other day about a tool they were developing to help with the IPO process, and they were kind of selling it as a way to ultimately reduce the number of hours that the law firm would have to spend on it, and um, by that same token, reduce the amount of money that it would cost the client. And so I think there are firms who are trying to get out ahead of it, right? They see that AI has the potential to really disrupt the billable model to, in my view, replace a lot of work that more junior attorneys and are performing or have been performing historically. And so um, I think, I mean, my personal view is that the law firms who are going to get it right are the ones who are ahead of that issue, who are embracing AI rather than trying to ignore it, and are using it as a almost like a marketing tool or as a differentiator. So if you're a large law firm and you have the ability to say, um, we can reduce the hours for this project by, let's say, 30%, or um, we have this database that has this immense amount of information that can really supplement the work that we do as individuals and as humans, and it will benefit you. I think that a lot of in-house counsel, a lot of legal departments would be open to having that discussion of what does that mean. How will my data be used? How will AI be implemented in your outside counsel processes? And I think there are a lot of in-house counsel who would find that a very attractive proposition.
Okay. Nice. Uh, what do you think will never change
In terms
in
of
terms of AI?
AI,
Yeah.
so I think I
Yeah,
don't know that AI will
no,
ever
but
be able
AI,
to
go for it.
replace. So one of the things that I think the highest value for both a law firm lawyer and an in-house lawyer is your sense of judgment. Um, what do you do when the data is not definitive, or when it could support more than one conclusion? Or when it's a new situation that you haven't dealt with before, where um, you have to go with your gut. And I think the lawyers that are most successful are those that have that, sense of judgment and discretion, and can make those decisions in the absence of, a full set of data. And so I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think AI will ever get to the point where it can fully replace a human's ability to make those sorts of judgment calls. And so I think that will be a situation that there will always be a need for humans. And even, I guess, related to that, no matter how good of a job that an AI model can do, I think there will always be value to having a human layer, whether it's to check the output and sense check it against reality, or whether it needs to evaluate and see whether the inputs are correct, or whether they may need to be adjusted. I think there's always going to be a need for some level of human intervention, and I don't know what that means, right? I don't know if that means 90% or 10% or somewhere in the middle, but I think anytime you have a system that's relying on a set of inputs to produce a set of outputs, there's always going to be a value to something above that system that's able to evaluate and make sure that the inputs are correct and that the outputs make sense.
So absolutely correct. So in Google, there are a bunch of engineers in Google, let's say L3, L4, L10. So L1, L2, L3 are the fresh level engineers who are coding, and Google has stopped hiring the fresh level engineers because AI can write a code which a fresh level engineer would write. They're now hiring L6 and L7 level engineers who can review the code done by an AI. Similarly, in the law field as well, do you think the fresh attorneys will have issue finding a job because the first draft, the first thing can be done by an AI beautifully? We need somebody who can review the AI work. Do you think that's going to be a challenge in the months and years to come?
So yes and no. I don't know. I think it will definitely. I think AI will definitely, and in some cases has already started to be able to do the work that your sort of first year, second year lawyers have done historically. But I think that the market always has a way of adjusting for that, right? So you may end up, I think, in an end state where you have fewer people going to law school than you may have had in the past. But when those people graduate from law school and they go do their jobs, there will be jobs for them. And not only that, but they may actually benefit because when let's say they're joining a law firm, instead of doing some of the work they may have done as a first year, they may be doing, let's call it higher impact work or higher value work, um, and are able to sort of start their career from a rung up on the ladder. And so I think, you can look at it one of two ways. You can look at it as AI replacing jobs or replacing work that lawyers do, or you can look at it as AI providing opportunity for younger lawyers to be able to do higher impact work earlier in their careers. I think if I were starting my career now, I'd probably be a little bit nervous about where things are headed with AI, but I would also be excited about the opportunity to almost bypass, some of the things that I had to do as a first year lawyer, and to be able to add more, um, kind of immediate and larger impacts earlier in my career. I think that'd be a pretty cool possibility for young lawyers.
Brilliant. Uh, so that's a beautiful piece of wisdom, Stephen. Stephen, if we had to leave this world, and if you want to leave a legacy, what legacy would you want to leave behind you? How do you want to be remembered?
That was a very deep question.
That uh,
So I think, I mean, this is just me personally. I think I would love for my impact to be less about the things that I did and the specific accomplishments. Like, he was able to do this as a GC, he was able to do that. And to me, I think I would feel that I lived a very good life if the legacy that I left was um, more about how I invested in the next generation. Um, and this goes back to what I talked about in terms of the mentoring that I enjoy doing, and really wanting to see other people succeed. To me, like the individual accomplishments, um, they will be remembered, but they will only be remembered for so long. And eventually everyone is forgotten, right? And so the biggest impact that I think you can leave as an individual um, is setting up the next generation to succeed and to do well, and to carry on work. And so for me, and this may be a very counterintuitive answer um, for someone who's in a legal profession, which is all about hierarchy and success. If I were forgotten for my individual accomplishments, fine by me. I would just want to know that that I made the people who came after me or the people around me, that I made their lives better, that I set them up to do better in the future. And for me, if that's how I'm remembered, then that's a life well lived.
It's a very thoughtful answer, Stephen. I hope people think like you more. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on this podcast with me and sharing your wisdom with so many people, so many viewers. This has been really, really enlightening for us. Really, thank you for your time and your wisdom here.
Thanks for having me. It was a really great discussion. I really enjoyed the thoughtfulness of the questions and the different topics that we talked about. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. God bless.